America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, members present this evening are myself, Mayor Marl, Council members Burgoyne, Gearbaugh, Peters, Rhodes, Roth, and Tahar. City staff present this evening are City Manager Campbell, Interim Clerk Rutledge, City Treasurer Bennett, Administrative Finance Assistant Korfman, and our Technology Support Coordinator, Mr. Shank. For the rest of you, if you'd be so kind to sign in the back, we would appreciate that. I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended. We have several additions this evening. The first are two additions to the discussion portion of our agenda. The first, actually both are per Mr. Burgoyne's request. The first is the sale of the Monroe Street property. And we have a corresponding memo dated August the 2nd from the Reinhardt Company of Realtors that correlates to that discussion item. And then the second addition to the list of discussion items is a Greenway Path proposal and a corresponding article from the from AnnArbor.com dated August the 1st, which Mr. Burgoyne also distributed. So those are two additions to the discussion portion of the agenda. In addition, we have a new business item, 13-123. Again, 13-123, that'll be the final action item under new business, and that is the purchase of a 2014 Chevy Tahoe. Again, directly relating to what we discussed just moments ago at our work meeting. And I'll have the clerk read that motion when we get to that particular item.
Mr. Mayor,
yep,
excuse me.
Yep.
I had sent in an email asking to talk about the Resident Support Services Task Force.
I was going to
discussion.
Yep, I was going to include that under commission and committee reports.
Oh, okay.
But if you'd like to add that as a separate item, that's fine as well.
That's fine.
Okay.
I just hadn't considered it as commission.
And then finally, Mr. Caparisi, who's going to be presenting in just a moment, distributed a binder full of a whole host of memorandums and material that I believe he'll be referring to in his presentation. Okay? So again, we have one new business item and then two additions under the discussion portion of our agenda. If there's nothing further, I would seek a motion to approve the agenda as amended. Moved by Mr. Gearbaugh. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Burgoyne. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion is carried, and the agenda is approved as amended. There are no absences this evening, so we'll dispense with that item. So we move on to our one presentation of this evening, which is by Tony Caparisi regarding the sale of some industrial sites in the city of Saline. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Is it okay if I close this?
Absolutely.
Laptop here? I had handed out a package of information that I think will be helpful to just walk you through a quick update. Boy, 90 days really goes by pretty quickly. It seems like we were all just here talking about these properties. The first packet of information is just a brief one-page summary of what's transpired in the last 90 days. And I'll quickly go through some of the remaining materials. You may remember on May 7th, Council approved the final proposal and listing agreement between the city and Swisher Commercial. On the 21st, I met with Manager Campbell and staff and reviewed comparable property listings and developed a price sheet for listing the 8 Saline Industrial Park office properties. On June 4th, all of these properties were listed and went live on the Swisher Commercial website and also the Commercial Property Information Exchange, CPIX, CoStar, and LoopNet, which are all national commercial website listings. On June 11th through the 12th, signs were installed. We installed a total of 7 Swisher Commercial for sale signs identifying each individual property and lot that's currently being offered for sale. Perhaps the most prominent is the extra large sign that was installed or has been installed right on Michigan Avenue there on lots 17, 18, and 19. On June 28th, we then rolled out a brand new dedicated website called Saline Land. Hopefully, all of you have had a chance to review that, and I've had comment from some of you. And then by August 5th today, or as of today, August 5th, there are no active leads to be reported. The first handout behind, well, the pages behind the cover letter, this is taken from our Swisher Commercial website, which we utilize the CPIX engine for our web listings. There's a summary page that will show you on per each property listed. For the Salk Trail Beach Court properties, in the past 90 days, there's been 134 unique hits on that property. And the list of different websites below that, as you can see, SiteLink, Google, Spark, Cranes, CPIX, Commercial IQ, Medic. These are all electronic listing spaces where our listings will be fed to, and if in fact there is a hit coming from one of those locations, it would be identified. But as of right now, out of the 20 or so different potential targeted areas, we had 98 links coming from the Swisher Commercial website, 18 coming off of CPIX, 9 just generally listed off of Google that were directed to us, people searching for Saline properties, and 4 from the Commercial IQ website. The Salk Trail Court and the Beach Court listing itself contains lots 17, 18, 19 along Michigan Avenue or Salk Trail Court, and the one lot 13 off of Beach Court. Those have all been consolidated into one listing. Individually within those listings, each of those properties are then highlighted. The second page is the 600 North Maple Road property. That listing stands by itself. Again, a total of 52 views for that listing over the past 90 days. And then for the Woodland Drive, Teff Court, and Industrial Drive properties, a total of 44 hits for those individual listings. Just want to point out that on the Saline Land website that went live on June 28th, it's currently averaging, this is from our web hosting people, as of yesterday or as of Friday, the Saline website, the Saline Land website is currently averaging 65 unique visitors per week. Unique means that they have not visited the site before. Total views are averaging about 130 a week. The Saline Chamber of Commerce has added a link to the Saline Land website, but the city's website has not yet been linked. And we believe that the number of unique visitors is trending up, or the number of unique visitors is trending up, and we believe that having the city's link added would give it a little bit of more of a boost. So hopefully we're going to get that done.
Absolutely.
Since I wasn't giving an electronic presentation, I went off and printed the pages from the Saline Land website. And at your leisure, you can peruse that, but you can see there's an opening page. There's a slider where it starts off with the Welcome to Saline sign that we had a photograph taken from the entry into the city. And then we identify some of the current industrial properties within our industrial parks. And then the user has the option to go to Salk Trail, the Reddy's and Shelton Parks, or the Saline mixed-use land, which is the Maple Road property. There's actually an interactive map that will pop up on the screen. You can zoom in and zoom out and specifically see those individual industrial parks, and the specific properties that are available will be highlighted. Also on that opening page, there's a copy, or there's a page, companies located in the Saline area, which lists, I think, the majority of companies that we were able to pull together that are currently located in Saline, traffic counts for the Saline area, demographics, and then a link to the Saline City website as well as the Saline Area Chamber of Commerce websites. And those links go directly to your Doing Business in Saline pages on both the city and the Chamber's websites. The Salk Trail Business Park highlights the individual 4 lots available, the location, zoning. Also on the attachments, if you click through the attachments, I didn't print the attachments out, but they include the surveyed lots for 13, 18, 19, and 20, future land use maps, property listing, and as well as a property brochure. The last handouts in this packet are the 3 property brochures for each of the listings that I mentioned: Sauk Trail, Reddy's and Shelton, and the mixed-use land, which is a brochure that will be and is generated off of the Swisher Commercial website or the CPIX listing. When somebody goes in to look at those specific properties, they can generate this flyer, which I've printed a hard copy out for your use. Going back to the Saline Land website again, for the Reddy's and Shelton Park, again, the same menu of options and information that's made available, as well as then the Shelton or the 600 North Maple Road mixed-use property listing. So after taking probably the first 45 or 60 days getting all of this up and running, the properties really have been out there and available for about 30 days. On the Saline or on the Swisher website, maybe 45 days, but the Saline Land website has been up and live now for about 30 days. And we are getting traffic to it. We've had no real substantive leads or inquiries from anyone that we've considered a bona fide prospect. But again, as I mentioned when we were going through the listing process, this will take some time to identify those opportunities and work with those prospects to bring them to some type of conclusion. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Very good. Thank you kindly. Mr. Burgoyne, you have a question?
I do. On these, I'm looking at these brochures.
Sure.
In the back. And the first one I look at is the one for Sauk Trail, and it has 18, 19, and 20, and 13 also.
Correct.
So possible use, it says industrial and office. I think, and it also says in here that, I believe it says in here that we will also consider SPA 1. Does it say
It says
there?
that for 17, 18, and 19, correct.
Yeah, so I'm not, is this zoned SPA 1 at this time?
I don't believe so. No, that's
Okay,
simply based on the references that were made during our meetings.
Yeah, I would be interested in making this land more flexible, and it's not a question to you, I guess it's just a comment to the council. I don't know what the correct process would be, but it seems as though we could take action to make this fit more into the future, where we will be losing the personal property from industrial. This is along Michigan Avenue. What would be the best use for the city? I think we need some process. I don't know what process we should have.
Okay.
Just
Yep.
a comment. Okay. Next comment is that I see that you've combined those 3 lots and 13, but your range of price is 105 to 125, and actually there's a 90 price on the lot 13. So I think that should start at 90 for the range if you're combining them on one list.
Yeah, I know in the detail for the specific listings on the website, I'll have to look at the,
That's just a comment.
yeah,
just
the
one thing
CPIX, I'll look at
picked up
that,
there.
and at the CPIX listing. I know it's clear on the Saline Land website, because we break each individual property out separately, and that Beach Court is listed at 90. The other 3 are listed
Okay.
at 105 to 120. 125 individually, 105 for the whole.
Okay, if it's clear on the
17.
website,
It's
that's fine.
It's also clear on this memorandum, or at least that's my understanding. Kind of a hot mic here. I'm looking at the packet, Mr. Burgoyne, that's entitled Saline Sauk Trail Business Park, Sauk Trail Court, and Beach Court.
Yes.
And the property overview, the 5th or 6th line down, it says Beach Court cul-de-sac offered at $90,000 per acre.
Right, but in the heading up above, it says the price range is 105 to 125.
okay.
And the price range would be 90 to
Okay.
125, is all I'm saying.
But Mr. Caparisi,
Yeah,
that's clear on the website?
If it's clear,
Well,
that's
it's clear-
fine.
Well, it is, It is on the website, but he's correct. The reason that it's an automatic formula in the website because they've started with 17, 18, and 19, and I didn't plug in or something. I didn't plug in the 3.6 acres for the beach court. If I put that in as a low number, the math would have been right, but I can correct that.
Okay, then on the Woodland Drive, Teff Court Industrial Drive item, you do have here, lot 14 is 8.34 acres, 2.6 buildable, priced at $44,000 an acre. Is that 44,000 times the 8?
You know,
For a reader, that might not be clear unless you have a total price.
well, it is. And again, I'm not sure what the total price is on the website.
So the website would show a total price?
I can look real quick, yeah.
It's just a little confusing the way it needs the reader to interpret the correct way.
Well, it's confusing as it is. Essentially, we listed these properties at the same individual and group pricing as the city formerly had them listed in CPIC. So we didn't change the pricing. It may just be how a presentation problem, how I input it into the system. But
Maybe a total price there rather than per acre would be better because it's kind of confusing if you have two acre different acre numbers and a price per acre. You don't know which is which.
that's, yeah, on the website, it's lot 13, 3.25. Oh, I'm sorry, what are we looking at?
Lot 14.
Lot 14, it says 8.3, it says price at 44, it's the same thing, so it could be confusing.
Yeah, so if you had
The intention is.
one number or
The
something.
intention is it's 44,000 for the 8 acres, which
Okay,
is going to be,
okay.
a challenge as it is, but
Okay.
that would be a good problem to have to deal with.
And then the third comment I had on the old service center, you still have the original 6.5 acres, but we actually changed that to more like 9 acres, whatever it is. I'm not sure the exact acreage, but the assessor
It'll be
has
updated.
the exact,
Yeah.
has the acreage.
Mr.
right?
Campbell can address that, Mr. Burgoyne, but it's a very valid point. Mr. Campbell?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Burgoyne. Council has voted to increase that, and that's staff did not get that information to Mr. Caparisi yet, so we will do that post-haste.
I'd like to reconsider that issue again. Because of it being the way you presented it, that is clearly two separate lots, and it cannot be combined according to the city assessor. So at this point, I think it's listed properly.
Go ahead.
Well, it would actually be a little bit more than that, than the 6.5, if you combine the thin piece to the south, as well as greater. So it's a little more than that because I think it's about a acre and a third or total. So it's not very much on the north side of the tracks, if I recall. So it is, but it is more than the 6.5 that's currently.
Yeah, I picked it up straight from the lot survey, but there's also going to be an easement in there to get back to the cell tower.
Correct.
So when you start
Correct.
looking at gross areas versus developable acres, but whatever number you'd like in there, we can get it right.
Those are my comments.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Burgoyne. Are there additional questions for Mr. Caparisi? No? Okay, Mr. Gearbox?
Just, what have you seen so far? Oh, I guess so. Have you seen so far in the property movement, even in just the Washtenaw County area from your own business?
Building is just, residential seems to be doing, just fine, but commercial, certainly any type of industrial development is just really not happening right now.
Because I did see the control gauging is going to start building there, but that probably was something in the plan.
Yeah, I think that has to do with their expansion plans,
Okay.
and some of those situations are happening, but as far as just somebody coming out of the box and saying, hey, let's go build a new facility, it's
We're still
pretty bleak,
going.
right?
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Burgoyne?
Yeah, I did see a Swisher report a few weeks ago, I think, that there was a shortage of office vacancy on the west side of Ann Arbor and downtown Ann Arbor. And so would that indicate that constructing office in this area might be reasonable?
You know, I've actually been dealing with some people on office development and looking for office space, and you know, the reality is Saline, as well as other areas south of 94 along that State Street corridor, you know, there still is an inventory of office space. You know, we still have the Gateway 2 building, which is 75% unfinished. So it's the absorption it's happening slowly, but as far as anybody coming out of the ground with a new office building, I haven't heard plans from anyone on that yet. So,
Tony, thank you for being here tonight. Keep plugging away. Appreciate the report.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we move on now to citizen comments on agenda items. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any citizen comments?
Mary Hess, and it would be 13120. The request to waive penalty on a water bill that was overdue. One time, I've lived 50 years on Canterbury, and I've been a good water bill payer. But one time I made a check, and of course the check, unbeknownst to me, went between the cushions of the couch. And I paid the penalty. And whether it's $1,000 or $2,000 or my $15, it's still I paid. And I feel that if it isn't in the city, it isn't for waiving. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hess. Are there any other citizen comments? No, then we move on to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for council discussion.
Move to approve as submitted.
It's been moved to approve as submitted by Councilmember Rhodes. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Peters. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda as submitted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. Moving on to unfinished business, item 13-23. This is application for IFT for McNaughton and Gunn Incorporated. This will be a motion to approve and adopt or not adopt the resolution approving application of McNaughton and Gunn Incorporated for an amended industrial facilities exemption certificate to add $201,600 in additional personal property for the 4-year period beginning December 31st, 2011 and ending December 30th, 2015, subject to the applicant entering into a tax abatement agreement with the City of Saline as prepared and approved by the city attorney, and to authorize or not authorize the mayor and clerk to execute said tax abatement agreement with McNaughton and Gunn Incorporated. Is there a motion?
Yes.
Okay.
I make the motion to approve and to authorize.
Okay.
Second.
Been moved by Roth to approve and authorize and seconded by Councilmember Burgoyne. Ms. Corcoran, do you care to comment at all? No? Okay. Okay.
Just,
Mr. Gearbaugh.
we're going to continue to have in our abatement agreement the clawback clause that we've always carried forward. Remember, Mr. Smith at the last meeting said that he'd recommend that we probably not do that, but we have used that in the past when Chelsea Industries left. So I want to make sure that we continue to do that as policy.
I support leaving it in there also.
You want to comment?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we had some internal discussion at staff with the timing and such, because at the next meeting, the August 19th meeting, we're going to have a work session with the Special Projects Commission to discuss IFTs and that type of, and the like. But at the same time, we had said to, the council has said to McNaughton and Gunn and Saline Electronics that you all would bring these back on this date. So we wanted to remain consistent with that and bring those back. So we would, staff certainly would say, I think, at least if I recall the discussion, 2 items, you have the clawback provision, if somebody leaves the community
Correct.
prior to the end of the IFT, there's that payback, that clawback. Then there's also currently, which is still in there, provision if the personal property goes away or 50% or more goes away, then could bring back the real property IFTs and put them on the full on the roll. So with those 2 items, I think my understanding is those items are going to be discussed, especially with the personal property tax item, that would be discussed at the work session on the 19th. So that's why we have not proposed any language changes.
Okay, I just wanted to double check and let everybody know that too.
Good question, Mr. Gearbaugh. Are there any additional questions or comments pertaining to this motion? No, then it's been properly moved and seconded by Roth, seconded by Burgoyne to approve and adopt and authorize. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. Moving on to unfinished business, item 13-97. This is application for an IFT from Saline Electronics Incorporated. This will be a motion to approve and adopt or not adopt the resolution approving application of Saline Electronics Incorporated for an industrial facilities exemption certificate for the total project cost of $1,429,121 for personal property for a period of 7 years beginning December 31st, 2013 and ending December 30th, 2020, subject to the applicant entering into a tax abatement agreement with the City of Saline as prepared and approved by the City Attorney, and to authorize or not authorize the Mayor and Clerk to execute said tax abatement agreement with Saline Electronics Incorporated. Is there a motion?
Move to approve and to authorize.
Moved by Gearbaugh to approve and adopt and authorize. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Burgoyne. I'm assuming you choose not to comment, Ms. Corfman? Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments from council? No? Okay. Then again, it's been properly moved and seconded to approve and adopt and authorize. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. Moving on to new business, item 13-120, request to waive penalty and interest for American Soy. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the July 23rd, 2013 memo from City Treasurer Bennett and the July 11th, 2013 letter from American Soy, and to authorize or not authorize staff to waive the penalty and interest assessed to American Soy for delinquent payment of the May 2013 water and sewer bill. Is there a motion?
I will move to authorize to waive.
Okay, it's been moved by Peters to authorize and waive. Is there a second to that motion?
I would support that for discussion purposes.
Okay, it's been seconded by Mr. Rhodes for discussion purposes. Maybe I'll ask our city treasurer to come up and comment. Thank you, Ms. Bennett.
Good evening. So as my memo, well, this one's working now. As my memo outlines, American Soy did mail us a check for their payment. And when they received their next month, they are a monthly user, or higher user, so they are billed monthly. When they received the next month's statement, they noticed that there was a late fee added. They called us, asked us why, said that the payment was, mailed in plenty of time, but we had not received the payment. They contacted other vendors that were issued a check that same day out of state. They all received theirs, but we had not received it. So they came in, paid the amount minus the penalty and interest, and asked that I remove the penalty and interest because they had issued the check, we just haven't received it. At that time, I referred them to the council. So.
Thank you, Ms. Bennett. Are there questions for our city treasurer? Questions? Mr.
Not really
Peters.
questions, just a comment. Remember several months ago, we had a similar situation. A woman had a water bill, and she never received the bill. So you can't pay a bill that you never received, and she ended up paying the penalty, which I thought was unfair. And so if the bank dropped the ball on that one, maybe the bank dropped the ball on this one too, or the post office. The post dropped the ball. So it's hard for me to imagine penalizing someone if they weren't at fault. So And also, I'd like to make a comment too that American Soy is really a good neighbor. They contribute to our local events, our local festivals. They always come to the plate for us. I think that they're good folks, and that's my opinion. If it wasn't their fault, they shouldn't pay the penalty.
Mr. Burgoyne?
I have a question and two questions. The first question is, has American Soy found their check, their original check that they mailed?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
And it hasn't showed up here either.
Okay.
Because we do have a note on the account that if it comes in, we'll return it, but we've not received that.
And in terms of the $3,000, how much of that was penalty and how much of that was interest? Well, there's a penalty plus interest, right?
Right, there's 10% penalty and 3/4 of a month interest. So 10% of that, majority of that is penalty.
Okay.
Additional questions, Mr. Burgoyne?
Yeah, I think in terms of policy making, where this is just one example, a 10% penalty for being a month late on a bill seems a lot. For example, credit cards, if you owe $1,000, they don't usually give you a 10% penalty plus 7% interest or 9% interest, whatever it is. They just give you the 9% interest. So in terms of looking at this issue, I don't think we should make exceptions once we have a rule, but I think our rules should be fair. So I'd like to look at this issue again.
Are there additional questions for Ms. Bennett? Any questions? No? Thank you, Ms. Bennett. Mr. Rhodes, you have a question?
A comment.
Okay.
And Ms. Bennett doesn't need to be there for that.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms.
dismissed.
But based on the information that's been presented to us, it appears to me that American Soy made a good faith effort to do what they were required to do. And since that check has not shown up anyplace yet, I agree with Councilmember Peters. It seems inappropriate to charge them in excess of $3,000. That's real money out of their pockets. It's not like it cost the city $3,000 because it didn't come in on time. There was some administrative cost, certainly, that we have incurred. And so what I would like to suggest, since we can't prove a negative, since the check hasn't shown up yet, is that we split that penalty and interest fees with them, so the city still gets $1,600 or so. American Soy saves $1,600. I'm really uncomfortable charging them $33,278 when it appears that they tried to do what they should have done. Makes it a little different than previous cases where people just forgot to pay or lost a check or whatever. These folks attempted to do what they should have done, and I think we, as a city, we ought to have a soul. We ought to try to work with our constituents.
Mr. Burgoyne?
I'd like to change the penalty in the future to 5% instead of 10% because I think 10% is onerous and excessive. And I agree with the people that see an injustice in this case, but I don't want to be arbitrary about how we do it. I would prefer to have a more reasonable penalty because we don't know that some of the other people didn't try or did not have good intentions.
Ms. Bennett, do you care to make an additional comment?
I'm going to listen.
Okay. Well, I actually agree completely with Mr. Burgoyne. I'm very amenable to having a future discussion about our policy as it relates to how we penalize people who do not pay water bills, sewer bills, and tax bills on time. But I think we have a precedent and standard that's well established in this community. And it goes without saying, no business and no individual who petitions this legislative body to waive penalties and interest chose not to pay whatever bill they ought to have paid in malice. American Soy is an outstanding corporate citizen. I'm a proud customer. I'm very pleased that they exist in our community. But I think Mr. Burgoyne chose his words very strategically and very appropriately when he said it would be inappropriate to arbitrarily determine or conclude that one petitioner's request had more merit than another. So I'm not in favor of waiving the penalties. However, I would support having a future discussion about our policy. Okay. Did you care to comment at all?
I was going to support, I agree with what you're saying, and I think that, and would like some direction, I think, from the council, whether maybe we have a policy on a one-time waiver or something like that, or in a situation like this, we do, as Mr. Rhodes suggested, to do it half. So I'd maybe get some feedback on that and bring that back to you. But again, not sure we want to take that action on this and set that precedence today.
Mr. Rhodes.
I would just respectfully disagree with this being an arbitrary decision, and that we have a policy that says that requests can come to council, and council can, in fact, dismiss those fees. If we're not going to do that ever, then we should not have that policy.
Mr. Peters.
It's just a one-time offense, first time that they've...
I believe so.
I think we all make a mistake one time. I think it becomes a pattern, then you start to impose the penalty.
I
But
don't
they're,
believe
like I
we've
said,
ever
they're
had any.
a good neighbor and a good business, and they step up to the plate for Saline all the time. And I'd like to give them a pass on this one.
Mr. Burgoyne.
I also think they're a good neighbor and a good business. They're an outstanding corporate citizen. What I would like us to do is, in my opinion, is to continue to hold the standards that we have now. And as we look at the policy, if we decide to lower the penalty, to maybe do it retroactively for 1 year for however many people we've penalized, give them back something, because we can change our policy and benefit, a certain period of time back. But I do think we should look at it in a deliberate fashion and be fair and equitable to everybody evenly.
Additional comments as relates to this motion? Okay, then it's been properly moved and seconded by Mr. Peters, or moved by Mr. Peters, seconded by Rhodes to authorize staff to waive penalties and interest. All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Why don't you raise your hands, gentlemen? Okay, all opposed say nay.
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 Okay, so that motion fails. All right. Does anyone wish to offer an alternative motion? No? All right, then let me ask for consensus on the point that Mr. Burgoyne raised and that I echoed. Is there consensus from this legislative body to have our Treasurer's Department, Ms. Bennett in particular, look at our policy as it relates to applying penalties and interest to late bills and come back with some sort of data for us to digest and discuss? Mr. Burgoyne and I are obviously in favor of that. Mr. Peters?
I don't know. I guess I'd have to see it first before I...
Okay.
Just a discussion.
Yep.
It's always worth discussing.
Yep.
Yes, I'd like to
Yes?
see it.
Okay. Mr. Rhodes?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Gearbaugh? Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So that's unanimous.
So you would like some information on waiving it one time, doing a percentage difference?
Maybe
Maybe
adjusting.
a little bit of
Other
everything?
communities?
Yep.
Other communities?
Yeah, what does Ann Arbor do? What do other communities
Okay.
do?
Okay.
I just want to make sure.
Mr. Roth?
I just want also to look into, this was a late payment. Others we had far as unexpected consumption, as leaks and so on. So let's make a distinction in those areas.
Yes.
And there was no loss to the city other than the clerk's time in this case. Otherwise, there's loss in sewer and water.
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. So, Ms. Bennett, I'll work with you, and once that memorandum is completed, we can add it to a subsequent council meeting as a discussion item, and then if there's consensus on how to move forward, we can proceed with the appropriate action on a future council agenda.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, if there's no alternative motion to be offered, then we move on to new business item 13-121, which is U.S. EPA assessment grant This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the July 30th, 2013 letter from Nathan Voigt regarding the environmental assessment application to the Downriver Community Conference, DCC, for Maple Road, 10.12 acres, and to authorize or not authorize staff to apply for an environmental assessment funding through DCC for 600 Maple Road and the 2 adjoining sliver parcels owned by the city of Saline. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Moved by Burgoyne to approve. Is there, or authorize, excuse me. You're comfortable authorizing, Mr.
Yes,
Burgoyne? Okay.
yes.
Just want to make sure we get the verbiage correct. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Tahar. Okay. Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nathan, if you wouldn't mind coming up too, so you can we'll kind of tag team. Nathan, work with Nathan at the Washington County Brownfield Redevelopment Authority Board. He's our staff liaison, and Nathan does a great job. And we were talking about the 600 Maple property on our service center site, and need to determine exactly what challenges, environmental challenges we have on that for future development and the like. And so this is, without stealing too much of his thunder, because he has appreciate the time that you committed to come down and work with us and helping us fill out the application and put the memo together. But there are some dollars, the grant dollars available for environmental assessments, and so through this process, I feel pretty confident that we will get something. So, but I'll turn it over to Nathan to comment further.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Thanks for having me tonight. Nathan Vogt with the Washtenaw County Office of Community and Economic Development. I'm the Brownfield Redevelopment Coordinator for the county, and Saline is one of 23 local units of government that participate with the county-wide authority. So we work with all local units to do assessments, to approve brownfield plans, et cetera. So really happy to be able to help out. And really, I think my memo basically explained it all, but we participate also, we joined the Downriver Community Conference, and they're an entity that that receives EPA, large EPA revolving loan funds and grant funds, and then they dole those out to their participating communities. So we join them, and we are eligible then to receive these grant funds, assessment funds, and they're really just for this purpose. You own some property there. We understand that there was a previous interest in the property, and they walked away maybe for concern from environmental issues. They did not share those reports that they did. I recommended that the city pursue the grant funds to complete your own phase 1, phase 2, and eventually a BEA, baseline environmental assessment, and then you own those documents and you can be apprised of exactly what some of the challenges might be to redevelopment. And then the next step could be, if we have a developer in hand that's ready to do something, we are informed, we know exactly what the issues are, and then we can work with you to come up with a plan to redevelop the property.
Thank you, Nathan. We appreciate you being here. Are there any questions for our guest or for Mr. Campbell? Ms. Tahar.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say I think this is an excellent initiative, and I just had one question about the nomination form. Under the assessment grant request, hazardous materials survey is not one of the things we're asking for, and I wondered why.
That refers to when you have a building with asbestos or lead-based paint.
Ah.
Yep, and
Okay.
so this would discover things under the ground or at the ground surface, those sorts of hazardous materials.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Burgoyne?
What is the turnaround time on review of the grant application?
On reviewing it and the DCC approving it?
Yes, yes.
They're on summer recess, but they actually do votes via computer, via email, so this could be turned around within a week. We would at least have a vote of the participating members. Now, the next step is they assign it to one of their pre-qualified environmental consultants, and they'll go through the eligibility steps to ensure that this site meets the EPA guidelines for eligibility for these grant funds. We think it does. I talked to the director of the DCC this morning, reviewed with her everything. I just wanted to make sure I understood. But then this will be a number of months to get this off the ground, but we should know whether it was approved within a week.
Okay, now, second question. This is only for environmental issues. This site had actually 2 issues. Another issue it had was wetland encroachment and some spoilage, land spoilage was actually pushed over in a wet area, and you now have, if you do a soil boring, you have muck underneath in some areas. So it will not talk at all about that. It will only talk about the contamination. Is that right?
The phase one is the investigation on paper of the chance that they'll find something. The phase two environmental assessment is where the consultant says, based on what we know about the property, one thing you just mentioned, we feel we have to do soil borings in these locations. So the phase two will discover the fact that you might have muck or unsuitable soils, which I think is mentioned in the initial, the work that previous developer had done as well. So we can craft that phase two to get the maximum amount of information for the budget dollars that are allotted. So we'll get quite a bit of information, I believe, with the phase two information.
Super.
Thank you, Mr. Burgoyne. Mr. Rhodes.
Just a question for Mr. Campbell. I'm confused by the acreage is 10.12. That's a different number than I've seen before, and I'm not sure what we're talking about here.
That is the main portion, as well as there's a very small strip to the south as you're going up the hill to the south, and then the property on the north side.
On the north side also?
Correct.
Okay.
That's the number I've always seen between 10.1 and 10.2, right, for the total.
Additional questions? Mr. Gearbaugh.
So clarify, so if you're doing the soil borings and everything, so if there was any fill that was contaminated or put in there, we won't know it from this report, or we will know it from this report?
If there is fill that's been placed on the property,
Right, that may have potentially had any kind of
we
hazardous...
will know it.
We will.
The only challenge will be the budget. If you have a site that's so large and you have to do 10 or 12 or 20 borings, then you run into budget issues. I don't think that this site is that big that we'll run into that. So
No, I think
again,
it's in a location where they would have noticed it, so I think that's...
exactly. They'll look at the historic aerials, that they can determine where that fill was placed based on the level of disturbance. They're pretty good at crafting the soil boring plan to get the maximum amount of information.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Mr. Burgoyne.
Even if some broken up bituminous product from redoing roads was piled in one area of the property, that doesn't necessarily require remediation if it's not doing anything or going anywhere. Maybe a parking lot or a road could be built on it, right?
That's right. They'll do the boring and they'll identify that it appears to be construction fill, and they'll do their screening for the contaminants that they believe exist. And it could be that that particular boring is all they don't identify any contaminants that exceed the Part 201 criteria. It's just a matter of fill. So then you get into geotechnical considerations, and that's really not part of this scope. And that's where you worry about building foundations and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. So supporting the building, yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Burgoyne. I don't believe there are any additional questions, so Nathan, thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate your remarks. Okay. Are there any additional comments pertaining to this motion? I would just echo those statements made by Mayor Pro Tem Tahar, which is this is an excellent initiative and endeavor, and hope that we achieve some funding. So appreciate your work on this, and also appreciate staff's time as well. Okay? If there's nothing further, then it's been properly moved by Burgoyne, seconded by Tahar to authorize. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. Moving on to new business item 13-122. This is Citizen Engagement Portal. This is a series of 3 motions, the first of which is to acknowledge receipt of the August 1st, 2013 memo from Technology Support Coordinator Schonk regarding the citizen engagement, regarding citizen engagement, and report management system. Is there a motion to acknowledge receipt?
So move, or make the motion?
Yep, moved by Roth to acknowledge receipt. Is there a second?
Support.
Supported by Mr. Rhodes. Mr. Schonk, do you want to come up and maybe talk a little bit about your memorandum and maybe the 2 subsequent motions as well?
Okay. Yeah, after the presentation, there were a couple kind of follow-up questions that I thought I'd kind of fill in the blanks. So I hope that kind of answered any lingering questions, and if there are any further ones, I can answer them now.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Schonk? No questions? Okay, very good. That was pretty easy.
Okay, all right.
Why don't you stay up here just in case there are some additional questions or comments? But is there any discussion relating to the acknowledgement of receipt of the August 1st memo? No? Okay. Then all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. The second motion is a motion to authorize or not to authorize the use of the web-based system C-Click-Fix for citizen report management needs with an annual fee of $6,000 and a one-time setup fee of $2,000. Is there a motion?
Move to authorize.
It's been moved by Mr. Rhodes to authorize, seconded by Ms. Tahar. Is there, so it's been properly moved and seconded. Is there discussion or questions? Mr. Burgoyne.
And the $8,000 is coming from what line item?
I broke it up over 2 line items. The one item originally budgeted $5,000 for the entire project, but at that price point, I didn't feel we'd really get a compelling product. So I thought the extra cost was warranted, and that initial funding beyond the $5,000 would come out of the city innovation fund. And I think it's line.
Oh,
in there. I don't remember offhand what the line is.
Yeah, I see it.
Additional comments or questions? Mr. Rhodes.
I'm glad to see the city moving forward with this particular program. And as soon as the city is fixed up with C-Click-Fix, then I can remove my connection to C-Click-Fix. I've gotten 4 reports since we started talking about this whole thing, so there is a need for it out there.
Yeah.
I just want to say, as it relates to this motion and then the third motion, I'm very supportive of these initiatives. I want to compliment and applaud Mr. Rhodes because he's been a real leader on this front in regards to more constructive engagement of our citizens. And I think this is a great resource and a great tool for those of you in the audience and those of you who will be reading about this or listening at home. It's just another mechanism by which you can report problems and issues in the city and engage with local government. So I'm very pleased that this is coming to fruition. I appreciate our staff, in particular Mr. Schonk, for your work on this. And then my only question or comment would be, you know, with all of these initiatives that we deal with, it's disseminating the information and getting it out there. So I hope to see something on our weekly email update in the FYI newsletter, on our homepage. You know, I'm sure that the Post and the Reporter will put something in those publications as well. But anything that we can do to make sure that people know that this is available and it will be a real useful tool, I think that'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay. Any additional comments, Mr. Gearbaugh?
Yeah, this is something I think we've needed, and I'm glad that it's going to be going forward. But I am worried about how acceptance is by the public and everything, so focusing our intention, I think, on doing this one first and getting a buy-in and having any bugs and everything fixed first. I'd rather see this moving ahead forward than the next one so much at this time. So I'm more in support of this one than I will be of the other one for the Citizen Participation Suite, because I'm not so sure how we're going to use that yet. And just to put a piece of software into place without having everything working is kind of putting the cart before the horse. And I've run into that many times. So at this point, I'd rather we just focus at this time on the Citizen Report Management tool.
Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Mr. Roth?
Since there's 2, and I want to ask if he could share with us and review the difference between the 2, the C-Click-Fix and the Citizen Participation Suite.
Yep, please.
Okay.
So that's for the general audience to know likewise.
Sure. Yeah, in a nutshell, the first one, the C-Click-Fix, is essentially a report management system. So residents can report any incidents that the city should be aware of. So a broken curb, graffiti, any kind of, usually out in the general kind of public areas is kind of the main idea behind it, to help with code enforcement, to make the city aware of issues maybe we're not of. And the second part is more for citizen feedback. So surveying, also with agenda items specifically, you can get feedback on specific items from residents. So in a nutshell, that's kind of the breakdown.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. Any additional comments or questions? No, then it's been properly moved by Rhodes, seconded by Tahar to authorize. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. The third motion will be a motion to authorize or not authorize the use of Granicus Citizen Participation Suite for citizen engagement platform needs with an annual fee of $6,888. Is there a motion?
Move to authorize.
Okay, it's been moved by Rhodes to authorize. Is there a second?
Second, for
Second.
purposes of discussion.
Okay, seconded by Ms. Tahar for purposes of discussion. What questions or comments do people have? Mr. Do our mover, seconder? Yeah, Ms. Tahar.
Yes, I agree with Mr. Gearbach that we might not be ready for this full implementation of this system right now. It seems like the kind of thing that needs a little bit of thought about how we will use it and how we would put it out there. So I'm not opposed to doing it. I'm just thinking that it may require more of a build-up and education process than the other one.
Thank you, Mr. Tahar. Mr. Rhodes?
I would partially agree with Mr. Har there that it is going to require some upfront training and education. And my understanding is that while we would hopefully be authorizing this evening, it's not like we would be putting it up on the site and putting it out there within 2 weeks or whatever. It's just authorizing the movement to go ahead and get the process started.
Mr. Gearbaugh?
Is there a possibility to proceed with having them just do a demonstration for us and understand that instead of, I'd rather see it work and see how it work in our situation because, again, I think we've got one piece that we're going ahead and need to spend all our effort on that first before we go into this next piece. And if we can have a demonstration on actually how this other piece would work for us instead of just committing to it, I think is a better approach.
Yeah, and that's absolutely, we can set up a webinar and go through the whole process. I think the original idea behind it was kind of a bang for your buck in a sense with promotion where we could say, here's the app, they complement each other to launch them at the same time. But I understand your concerns too with it might be a little bit much for people maybe, so.
My one concern is that you're probably going to be the one that's going to be overseeing most of this, and so in addition to everything else that's going on, I'd rather have a good product on the one before we have an okay on one and maybe a failure on the other, so.
Okay.
Mr. Burgoyne?
Yeah, I also have a question on what part of the community will participate on this, and are we going to get more squeaky wheels and not get a full view of the community, or how do we sort of figure out what kind of interaction we're having with the community? So I would like a demonstration and discussion prior to launching it too.
Okay. So similar to Mr. Gearbaugh's comments?
Yes,
Okay.
I agree with him.
All right. Are there any additional comments? No. I would, just to reiterate, well, it goes without saying that the C-Click Fix system, I think, has more of a value to our citizens and to the community than the Citizen Participation Suite. However, I also see merit in this system as well. I do understand my colleagues' comments and concerns about making sure we successfully integrate C-Click Fix prior to launching a second program. So if it's the majority's intent not to move forward on the approval of Granicus this evening, that's fine. We can certainly engage that company and get you all some more information and come back at a later date. So I'm in favor of it, but it's one of those things you can definitely argue it both ways. Mr. Rhodes.
And I would rather, given the sentiments here, I'd rather withdraw my motion than have it defeated with the understanding that we would get more information about the Granicus program. And you know, I personally, I'm really comfortable with it, but I want to have everybody on council comfortable with it before we institute it.
Okay. So thank you, Mr. Rhodes. So Mr. Rhodes is going to withdraw his motion. Ms. Tahar, I'm sure you have no objections?
Yes,
okay.
That's perfect.
Okay. So that motion is withdrawn, and Mr. Shonk, I think you heard the consensus here, which is maybe to gather a little bit more information. We'll come back and have a future dialogue and discussion about this program. Okay? All right. So unless somebody else would like to move to authorize the Granicus program or offer an alternative motion, which I'm not hearing, we will move on to our final motion under new business. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. Which is the one we added earlier this evening, which is new business item 13-123, the purchase of a 2014 Chevy Tahoe. This will be a motion to authorize or not to authorize city staff to purchase a 2014 Chevy Tahoe from Berger Chevrolet as a sole source in the amount of $26,254.
Motion to authorize.
Okay, it's been moved by Burgoyne to authorize. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Roth. Since the situation is somewhat unusual, Chief, do you want to come up and make a comment just to explain to those in the audience and those who will be viewing at home why we're doing what we're about to do this evening?
Thank you. The reason that this was brought and added to the agenda was because I made a phone call about purchasing a new Tahoe and was informed that if we do not make an order before August 22nd, we would not be able to order a Tahoe until at least November or December of 2014 because Chevrolet is doing a changeover. And so I got a couple of bids from different places, including a local Chevrolet dealer who was unable to match the Oakland County bid price, which is the price set before you in the motion. And I would ask that you approve this for the police department.
Thank you, Chief Rennick. Are there any questions? No? For those of you in the audience and those of you who will be watching at home, we did discuss this earlier, so I don't think there's going to be a great many comments, but I just wanted to offer that up nevertheless. Chief, thank you.
Oh, I have a question.
Oh, you have a question, Mr. Roth.
What color is it going to be?
You know, you're the third person who's asked me that.
I want the
I like
public
to
to know.
vary our fleet, and so I'm proposing that we do a silver one this time.
Okay. Pink?
Silver.
Okay.
Silver. Silver. There. I wanted to make sure that gets on the record. Silver.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it. Okay. Is there any discussion? No? Then it's been properly moved by Burgoyne, seconded by Roth to authorize. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. We move on to discussion items, commission and committee reports, and I do want to note before I entertain the first report that I did speak to the clerk, just moments ago, and we're going to slightly change the verbiage on this particular line item, which is recurring and appears on every council agenda. It's going to start to read commission, committee, and task force reports. So we actually have 4 task forces going right now, and I suspect in the future we'll have more, and we want to make sure that those of you who represent or chair a task force know that you're always welcome to report back on what your group is doing. Okay? So I just wanted to make you aware of that change. So commission or committee reports. Mr. Gearbaugh.
Just to let you all know, the LDFA/TIFA task force met last week to get underway, and we elected a chair and got in place for that. Really, the idea is understanding what the TIFA can do and what the LDFA can do, and hopefully over the next couple of months, we'll probably have 3 or 4 more meetings. The idea is to look at what initiatives we currently have and what can we do differently perhaps with TIFA funding and such to improve our business aspects and really get an idea of the other thing of what LDFA will do after the change in tax proposals and such, because we did, under the way that we created them, was the idea that they would become self-sufficient and help in creating and redoing their own roads and that type of thing. That may not be so true in the future, so we need to look at how all this together, all these taxing districts will work in the future. And hopefully that will be something we can come forward with to council and to actually the entire LDFA and TIFA board.
Okay. And just to confirm, Mr. Gearbaugh, that group's going to be looking at leveraging new economic development opportunities, looking at our industrial development plans, the spark analysis, and improving our promotional materials that we distribute to business owners or prospective business owners when they come to Saline. Is that correct?
Eventually, part of it right now is really getting an understanding of it, because we have so many new members, and over the years that we've transferred, that all the individuals part of it need to understand exactly what it does mean. And yes, that probably will be involved in it. So we're hoping that what we bring forward will be a new idea. There have been some good ideas. I think some of the individuals like Mitch Rhodes, who's also on it from Quantum, proposed something maybe like a Wi-Fi. We're also looking at the idea of potentially a high-speed internet, which potentially could make us more valuable in our industrial park to people coming from Ann Arbor and such. They see their perspectives from their own businesses of what could provide us with a better advantage point out in the market. So it will be interesting to see. So there may be some different ideas in this. What we want to do is get them together and actually have a different idea and actually look at some of those things, but they may be a little different than what we originally had proposed.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Mr. Rhodes.
I actually have 2 items to report on. The first is the Environmental Commission, and that commission is co-sponsoring with the county a cleanup day with the county solid waste program. I just distributed a flyer here to other council members, and this will be published. The cleanup day is on September 21st from 9 to 2, and it'll be over at the DPW building. And there is a whole host of acceptable materials that can be turned in, as opposed to our e-waste recycling event. This one, you can turn in appliances that have Freon in them, cleaning supplies, motor oil, furniture, old tires, just about anything you can think of, and the county will take them away. This is open to any resident within the county, but not businesses. So you must be a resident within Washtenaw County to bring items to this particular cleanup day. And there is a suggested donation of $10 a vehicle. It's not a requirement, though, so if you show up and don't have $10 with you, you can still drop things off. Up to 4 tires for free. There's a fee for additional tires after that. And televisions, washers, dryers, refrigerators, all kinds of stuff. So we hope to see a bunch of people come out, and hopefully this will not only have some materials be recycled, but it'll also keep them out of the landfill and maybe out of the roadside ditches and backyards of people. So I would appreciate it if the other council members also distributed that information and let folks know about it. The second item that I have is the Resident Support Services Task Force, and I had sent out an email towards the end of last week with the spreadsheet as it currently exists. It has 6 pages of items that are listed that are available to Saline City residences. And under the third column, which is the type of assistance, you may have noticed that there are some items in bold on that, and that is the suggested keywords that would be searchable. So the idea is that this document would have a link on the city website. People could go to it, and if they wanted to know about what food resources were available for them, they could put food in the search column, and it would gather all those up and show them to them. It appears Mr. Schonk did a very preliminary check for me, and it appears that it would cost about $400 to have Design Hub add the plug-in module to the city website that would permit this document to be searchable. And that searchable plug-in could also be used for other items on the city website. Did I explain that okay? Yes. All right. I'm more of a novice than most of the others here with this electronic stuff, but I'm learning. So anyway, I was looking for input, comments, suggestions. The only other item that isn't on here yet that might be is, and we're waiting for a response from our city attorney as to whether or not we can offer any kind of reduction in water or sewer bills for those people who qualify for hardship. And I think as soon as that information is available to us, unless there are other things that council wants to add, this document we're ready to go, and the task force will have finished its duty.
Okay. Real quick before I entertain Mr. Gearbaugh's questions or comments, I'm assuming most of you did not print off the document, but please do take a look at it. And if you do have suggestions or questions for Mr. Rhodes, I'm sure he would welcome your phone calls, yes, your emails. And then what's the time frame moving forward? Are you looking to finalize the document within the next month, couple weeks? I know you're waiting for an analysis from our city attorney.
Right, and as soon as that comes in, barring any significant input or any input from anybody else, it's ready to go.
Okay, very good. Mr. Gearbaugh.
Just a couple things. I support going for this module add-in because I think we'll use it in HDC and some other of the other units. The only question I have, once the task force dissolves, how will this document be updated and maintained?
That is a good question. We did talk about that.
And that's always the concern about these type of things.
Yeah, Mr. Dill is a member of that task force also, and I suspect what will happen is that annually we will reconvene the task force for the sole purpose of reviewing and updating. Because you're right, that's the one fallacy to these kind of documents. You put them on the site and people forget about updating them.
Right. I think the more appropriate verbiage would be that the Resident Support Service Task Force, once this report is finalized, sort of goes dormant for a period, doesn't dissolve, and that it reconvenes, yeah, on an annual basis or however often to review and make sure that the information is timely and appropriate. So if you do have questions, concerns, or things you'd like to see added to the document, please get those to Councilmember Rhodes, and then maybe I can work with you once you get the analysis from the city attorney, because I'd like to do more of a formal presentation at an upcoming council meeting, so that everyone is aware of what's in the document and it gets sort of disseminated, or at least the notion of the document gets disseminated to the public.
Yeah,
okay?
that would be fine. I'm considering this as a draft at the moment.
Wonderful. Thank you kindly. Okay? Any other commission or committee reports?
I had
Oh, Mr. Hart, excuse me.
Just one comment about this. I think it looks great. And one possible addition could be the Washtenaw Urban County programs that are available.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion if it's not on there.
The Washtenaw Urban County programs.
Okay.
I'll
talk with you later on that.
Okay.
She's the board designate, so she can get you the information, Mr. Rhodes, but that'd be a good addition.
Is 211 on there? Yeah.
Any other commissioner committee reports? Mr. Gearbaugh.
Just real quick, not trying to steal the thunder from Historical Society ever, but the Rentschler Farm was given its designation as the National Register of Historic Properties from the
Great.
federal government. So that was been a long time process that Cynthia, Christensen, sorry, has been working on diligently, and it's a great recognition for our farm out there. So hopefully that'll help for more funding and looking at other aspects in the future.
Terrific. Very good. If there are no other commissioner committee reports, we move on to reports and other announcements. Just want to remind everybody on the dais and those in the audience that we do have our second economic town hall meeting tomorrow evening at 6:30 p.m. at the Senior Center. Please do what you can to continue to promote that, encourage citizens to attend. We welcome anyone's questions, their comments, and their concerns. Although the first town hall was lightly attended, I thought the presentation that staff put on was very solid. And I welcome the opportunity to engage and participate again tomorrow evening. So again, it's tomorrow evening, 6:30 at the Senior Center. It's scheduled to last till about 8 o'clock. So if you have people you think would benefit from attending, please email them. Please put it on Facebook, social media. Do what you can just to support us and help get a good turnout there tomorrow evening. Okay? Are there any other announcements? Ms. Tahar.
Thank you. I would encourage everyone to go by the library Brecken Trail and view the new statue that's been, I'm sorry, it's a monument because of its size. I've been advised the technical term is monument, not statue, that's been added to the city's sculpture landscape. The Brown family funded the monument by Jane DeDecker, and it was unveiled yesterday at a ceremony at the library. It's very, very nice.
What's it depict?
Farm family and learning.
Oh, yeah.
It's very, very, very impressive. And it was a nice ceremony, and like Ms. Tahar said, we greatly appreciate Brown Farms donating some financial resources to see the project come to fruition, but we also appreciate the library staff and our library director and library board member Bill Roach in particular for their leadership in making this happen. So it was a very, very nice afternoon, and it's a great piece of public art, a great piece of additional public art for our community. If there are no other reports and announcements, we move on to the Salt Springs property. Mr. Peters.
Okay, and just to say that monument is beautiful. It's right between the non-motorized trail and the library. If you get a chance to stop by and see it, it's really beautiful. The mayor asked me to give a quick update on Salt Springs, so here we go. For those of you who may not know, if you're say from Chelsea or from out of town, Saline gets its name from the French word salt. It was given that name by French explorers in 1632 who came up the river and found natural salt springs in the area. And back then, salt was a very treasured item in the wilderness. So since then, about a year ago, we discovered yet a working salt spring still functioning on city property. It's on a piece of property down by the river. It's part of Saline River Valley, same as Mill Pond Park and Curtis Park. It's part of the floodplain. And we thought about making this a history walking trail or a park or something like that. So there's three solid reasons to look at this project and make this piece of land something special. Reason number one is that just like in Wilderness Park and Peoples Park and Mill Pond Park, there's a sewer line that runs the entire length of the property. And the trails that you walk on in the other parks, they double as a maintenance path for those sewer lines. Say you get a break in a sewer line, you can get a truck and a crew out there in a hurry and make a repair. But with the property down at Salt Springs, that sewer line was put in 1962. And I'm sure it's been maintenance from time to time, but right now it's really overgrown. And there's some very large trees in the way and a lot of brush, and there'd be no way you could get an emergency vehicle down there or repair truck and a crew. So I talked to Jeff Fordyce about this, who's our director of the DPW, and he supports this project because I think he's interested and eager to get in there and spruce up that trail and make that trail accessible again so we can get down there and make a fast repair. Because reconditioning the maintenance path will be a great benefit to the citizens that depend upon that sewage line for breaks. Then they're without their service for quite a while. The second reason would be that this piece of property, to develop it, would support our FY14 city strategic plan for enhanced quality of life, allowing us to offer citizens a beautiful non-motorized pathway. The Salt Springs property is kind of a keystone. If it's right between Curtis Park and Wilderness Park, it's right between the two. And imagine someday we could connect Mill Pond to Curtis, to Salt Springs, to Wilderness. It'd be a beautiful ride, free of traffic. An awful lot of it is alongside the river, and it's heavily wooded. It'd just be a beautiful, beautiful ride down there. And I think that it would be a nice addition to the city and maybe the envy of our neighbors. And remember that there's a business component to parks, that when businesses are looking to locate here, they look at your schools, they look at your housing, and look at your parks. And I think this would be a really great addition. The third reason is that this particular parcel is just loaded with history. More than I want to talk about right now, but it's been inhabited for 10,000 years because of the salt on site. It attracted mammoth and mastodons and early hunters. It attracted the Potawatomi Indians who settled there and traded salt with their neighbors. It had a variety of different military functions down there. And it was also the site of the very first European settlers, the first white settlers that came to Saline. That's where town really began, down there by the salt ponds, which is down by the DNR fisheries, down by the fish ponds down there. And town later on moved up to the Four Corners where we know it today. So there's an awful lot of history down there, and it'd be nice to recognize that history in some way and set up this history walking trail. Some of the progress to date is that our staff, Kathy Corbin, is presently looking at grants that are available to help us along with this. Let's remember that the city owns this piece of property. It belongs to us, it belongs to everybody in this room and everybody listening. So there's really nothing to purchase. It would just need spruced up, cleaned up, and some amenities, and we can make it into a nice park. Of course, hopefully we can use some grant money to do that. The south entrance into the park down by the DNR fish ponds, we're currently talking with a landowner down there who is very interested and very enthusiastic about this project, and we're looking at maybe establishing a path across her property which would take us across the DNR property up into the Salt Springs, so that would be a great benefit to the project. The north entrance, our city manager Todd Campbell is currently investigating establishing a north entrance path off of Monroe Street past the treatment plant into Salt Springs property, and that's vital for two reasons. One, that's where a large gate is at in case you need to get an emergency vehicle down there or a service crew or even mowers. That's where the vehicle would enter. And two, since we've come to a settlement with Johnson's Controls, that property will become part of the city before too long, and that opens up a whole new possibilities for that north entrance, parking, a trailhead, what have you. So that, again, it will be, it's really a bonus for us. It'd be a great way to connect Curtis to Salt Springs. That's trails. I've recently contacted a trail designer. I've been talking to Myers Trail Foundation. Myers is in Myers shopping stores. And he plans to come here and visit me in September, and together we're going to walk the site, and he's an expert at this, and hopefully he can share his expertise with me, and we can look at what's the best way to lay these trails out and what works and what doesn't work. Presentations, I've given 6 presentations so far to citizens in town, and they've all been well received on the subject. Seems like everybody is enthusiastic about it. We've established an account here in the City Hall. If anybody wishes to make a donation to the project, simply make out your check to the City of Saline and write on there Salt Springs. And we're building up a small account because in the future we're going to need some fencing and signage and what have you. So that's important. Thank you, Chris. You've put on the website for us. It's under the history section. It's very nicely done. If you want to read more about the Salt Springs project, just go onto the history site of our city website. And for support so far, we have the support of course, City Council, Parks Commission, Saline Historic Commission, Saline Area Historical Society, Saline Green Alliance, Riverway, and Huron Valley Archaeological Society. So onward and upward. Forward we go.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. And so just to clarify, so you're looking at some accessibility issues right now?
Yes.
Looking at some grant funding?
Yes.
And then, if I'm not mistaken, you're going to be working with the Parks Commission sometime either this month or next month to draft a resolution officially asking City Council to designate that as a park. Is that correct?
Yes, we'll have a proclamation.
Oh, proclamation.
And we'll present a resolution to City Council.
Okay.
And we'll do that at the next Parks meeting, which is the third week of this month.
Very good. Okay. Are there any questions or comments for Mr. Peters? Mr. Rhodes.
I want to thank Councilmember Peters for his almost single-handed movement of bringing this forward. It's great that you discovered the salt spring that's still in existence, and I think it's really important that we acknowledge that and provide access so visitors and residents can go down and see it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I would just echo that. It's a wonderful endeavor, and we would not have progressed to this point had it not been for your leadership and your passion. And it's definitely acknowledged, but more importantly, it's appreciated. So thank you very much. All right.
I agree.
Mr. Burgoyne agrees. I think it's unanimous. If there's nothing further on the Salt Springs property, we move on to the sale of the Monroe Street property, which was a request by Mr. Burgoyne. So I'm going to turn it over to him, and then I'll get Mr. Campbell in on this as well to acknowledge this letter from the Charles Reinhardt Company of Realtors dated August the 2nd. But Mr. Burgoyne.
Yeah, the two items that I was interested in on Monroe Street were the price and the survey. The price notice that I got was that it would be about $300,000, and that just seemed like a very, very round figure, almost as though it was a general figure rather than analysis, careful analysis. But in fact, a letter that we had on our table tonight showed that Reinhardt actually, with city staff, looked at some numbers and figured the price would be somewhere between $275 and $300, and estimated about $80,000 for a price, for an asking price, being reasonable. $80,000 for the 3.61 acres would be $288,800. So if there were an asking price of $289, seems to me that would reflect more that the city actually looked at it and did fix some asking price rather than it just being global 300. So that was one issue. So maybe that issue, we could discuss that issue and see what other council members think of it. Okay.
Well, first, Mr. Campbell, do you care to comment at all before I do sort of a round robin and get everyone's take?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the discussions that we did, as the letter reflects from Reinhardt, from Darby Colano and Rick Mangan, we did meet together, city staff and Reinhardt folks, and had some pretty quality discussions with the information that had been done, some market analysis and the like by both staff as well as Reinhardt. And with that information and discussing on, as it's zoned currently, that, this is probably, and with, as Mr. Burgoyne pointed out in his email, some of the challenges of that lot, it certainly is, not significant such as 600 Maple, but it's not flat and ready to go, similar to like the property at the corner of Woodland and Maple. So, but having said that, talking with Reinhardt folks today to reinforce, again, they, they're certainly happy to do whatever their client wants them to do. They feel they're solid with the 300, and of course the topic that we talked about was once you set a price, you can always go down, but it's hard to go up. and certainly it raises a lot of eyebrows if you want to go up. It does happen from time to time, there's no doubt, but and then also, the other thing that they pointed out was that when someone's doing a price range search at 300, you're also going to get between the 200 to 300 as well as the 250 to 350, so it's going to fall, so you're still going to be in that, it's going to give you additional exposure. So that's why we would recommend staying at the 300,000, and in their professional opinion, the 300 doesn't give that false that sense that there was no real analysis so.
Actually, the letter says they're recommending 80,000 per acre. That's the way I read it.
So, just so that I'm very clear, Mr. Burgoyne, so you're recommending that instead of articulating a range of between 275,000 and 300,000, that we offer that parcel for a very specific amount?
Right, like 80,000 per acre would be 189. So 80,000 an acre seems to be what they're recommending in their first sentence of the Reinhardt letter. So if that's, and also I'd rather sell it sooner than later. So, and I think you don't have to have more than 80,000 to get a fair price. So I also think that 290 or 289 is a little bit more specific than 300. 300 is more general-ish number.
Okay. All right, so I need to get a consensus from council as to whether you want to make a change or whether you want to continue with the status quo. So let me start down here at the end. Mr. Roth, what is your opinion on this issue?
I'm okay as it is. I trust the realtor in their judgments.
Okay. Mr. Gearbaugh?
I would be pricing it as one parcel, so I'm not sure why we're selling it at an acre. So whatever their recommendation at that price is fine with me.
Okay. Mr. Rhodes?
I'd like to see a bit of a lower price. As has been previously stated, the value to the city of this property is not the sale of it, but the development of it. And I think if we price it lower, somewhere around the 60,000 an acre range, we would probably get movement on it much faster. And the comparison, the two comps that were stated, as Mr. Campbell stated earlier, those are flat, clean, ready to go. And this site is not. It's hilly, it's wooded. It has two structures on it that need to be dealt with. And I think that ought to be reflected in the asking price. And then my final comment is at the end of the first paragraph, the statement is there that the city should be prepared to dispose of those house and barns, and I don't think that we should. I think it should be sold as is and let the developer, whoever it is that purchases that, deal with those two structures. They may decide they want to use them for some purpose or other during the development or during the construction phase, and it's much cleaner if we just sell it and we're done with it.
Ms. Tahar?
I agree with Mr. Rhodes' comment about the house and the barn. I don't think that should necessarily be a foregone conclusion that the city would dispose of that. The element of setting the price at 300, giving wider exposure to people who are doing online searches for property is somewhat persuasive, but I am not a real estate expert, so I don't feel qualified to second guess the realtor. That we've hired them because they are professionals, and presumably we assume that they know what they're doing.
Mr. Peters?
Yeah, I agree with Councilman Rhodes' comments. I once bought a piece of property, held a house on it. It cost me more to take the house down than the property cost me. So I trust in Reinhardt's judgment, and I agree with the Councilman Rhodes' comments.
Okay. Let me take the issue of, real quick, Mr. Burgoyne. Let's take the issue of the final statement there in the first paragraph of the memo dated August the 2nd, which is that the city shall be prepared to dispose of the buildings at its expense once the negotiation is concluded. Actually, I was going to bring up the same point that Mr. Rhodes brought. So it appears that there's a majority that should be removed. I think you sell it as is, and the city, I think it would be inappropriate for us to incur that cost. That is an opinion that's shared by Mr. Rhodes, by Ms. Tahar, and Mr. Peters. Mr. Roth, you're nodding in affirmative. Mr. Gearbaugh?
Yeah, if that's going to be taken into consideration, the pricing, that's fine.
Okay. Mr. Burgoyne?
I would agree with Ms. Tahar and Mr. Rhodes that should, yes, the price should be taken into consideration, but I would also like to read the first sentence of the Reinhardt letter. It said, "It is our conclusion that a fair market value for the city-owned parcel located at 207 Monroe Street will be approximately $80,000 per acre." Now, if you take $80,000 per acre, that's $288,800. That's their conclusion, and I think the first two council members said they would go along with Reinhardt. Well, what are you going along with? Are you going along with that sentence? And then if you subtract the cost for removal of those, we'd have to have some thought as to how much it is. Is it $20,000 worth or whatever? And take that off also.
Okay, well, there appears to be consensus that final statement should probably be removed, that we're going to sell the property as is, and the city's not going to incur the expense of demolishing or in some way rectifying the structures that currently exist on the parcel. I think, with no disrespect intended, that the debate over the price is a little bit, there's sort of a distinction without a difference. They're quoting it at $80,000 per acre, and then they give a range, which $80,000 per acre falls within that range. I don't have an issue with the way the property is currently being marketed from a price perspective. I understand that Mr. Burgoyne disagrees. I'm just trying to develop a consensus here. I think Mr. Roth is saying leave it as is. Is that correct?
Far as get the price with this thing being removed, I could see that could be lowered. I agree with Mr. Rhodes on that.
Okay.
But I was putting my faith into who we hired to sell, that we're doing the proper job.
Okay, so let's take just one step back then. So we're all of the assumption now that final statement in the first paragraph is removed, okay? So that we're not going to incur any expense related to the structures on the property. Mr. Roth and Mr. Rhodes would like to see the amount lowered. Mr. Gearbaugh, what's your opinion?
I mean, we've got a price out there. If we negotiate, they'll make us an offer, and we can either accept or reject.
Okay. My position is basically identical to Mr. Gearbaugh's, which is leave it as is, and this is all up for negotiation. Ms. Tahar?
We might ask the Reinhardt folks if changing the assumption about the barn and the house would change their estimation of what the asking price should be, and then my inclination would be to go with whatever they recommend.
Okay. Mr. Peters?
I agree with that.
Okay. Mr. Burgoyne, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I do. I think the conclusion of Reinhardt that this should be $80,000 per acre if the city removes the structures should be taken as their conclusion. And deducting from that about $20,000, that brings us in the range of $270 or $275. So I would suggest we take the $275 as the asking price, and let them remove and take care of the structures and so forth. Still in the range of Reinhardt. Reinhardt said $275 to $300. So just take the $275 and remove and let them deal with the house and structures.
Okay. Trying to develop consensus here, and we're getting a little bogged down. So let me take this. Let me try this one more time. Excuse me. Okay. So the city incurring any cost relating to the structures, that has been removed. That burden is on whoever acquires this parcel. Mr. Peters and Ms. Tahar offered the suggestion that now that verbiage is removed, maybe petitioning Reinhardt to see if that, in their professional opinion, would change the asking price. I'm very much amenable to that.
Come back with one number, though. Not a range.
You want one? Well, let's just see I'll ask what they come back to, and then if we want to specify one specific number or range, then council can do that.
If you have a range, you'll be talking all day, just have them come back with one number, which would probably be 270 or 275.
Well, they've basically given you one number here, but then they've also provided you a range. Again, it's somewhat a debate of, it's sort of a difference without a distinction here. So if there's consensus to petition Reinhardt to see if that would, in their professional opinion, change the asking price, we'll go ahead and do that. Mr. Roth, are you comfortable with that?
Yes, I am. The Councilman Peters and Tahar verbalized it better than I.
Okay. All right. Mr. Gearba, I'm assuming you have?
Yeah, it's unfortunate that we didn't have Reinhardt here to explain their memo so we would understand it, but basically, we're going to achieve the same issue no matter how we're looking at this. So $1 figure, list it at $275 and be done with it, if that's what everybody on council agrees to.
Okay. Mr. Rhodes?
I support what Councilmember Gerbach just said. 275 is a good number.
Okay.
So you have 3 at 275, and you have 2 at let Reinhardt come back.
No, I got 4 at let Reinhardt come back. I got Mr. Roth,
Oh.
Ms. Tahar, Mr. Peters, and myself.
And me if they give one number.
Okay. So it looks like there's consensus to engage Reinhardt and have them come back and give their opinion whether the listing price changes with the removal of that one statement at the end of the first paragraph. Are you clear on that, Mr. Campbell?
Of course it does.
I believe so.
Okay. Do you care to make any additional comments?
Yeah, we're certainly not trying to muddy the water, or certainly not trying to be argumentative, so please don't hear what I'm not saying. But for clarification, the approximate 80,000, part of that discussion was a range of 250 to actually even the number of 325 had been thrown out at one point during the discussion by Reinhardt. And as staff and Reinhardt discussed, the 300,000 was the dollar value. I understand they put a range in here, but I believe that's how they were trying to explain and justify where the 300,000 was coming from. So I just wanted to make that clear that they are not saying, that was not the intent of them to say there was 80,000 per acre. That's why the word approximately was in there. But we certainly will go back to them and ask them for a price with as is, and come back. So I guess my question is, whatever that number is that what we're going with, or do you want staff to bring that back to council yet again?
My recommendation would be, because there seems to be a variety of opinions here, that you get that information sometime in the next couple weeks, and at a minimum, it's added as a discussion item for council's consideration.
Okay.
Okay? Unless anyone objects. No? Okay. Then we'll proceed in the way I just articulated. Okay? If there's nothing further on the sale of the Monroe Street property.
There's the second part.
Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Burgoyne, please continue.
The second part of it is doing the survey now, because usually you have a sales survey depending on the use of the property. And in this particular property, there's a couple of things going on. There's structures on the property. It's irregular. It's narrower towards the road. The developer is going to want to look at it and try to do what's best for the development. But in doing that, they may offer something better for the city in terms of that 30-foot parcel that we set aside. They may come up with a better way that would be better for the Parks Commission and better for the city and better for the developer. So I don't think that we should put anything in stone ahead of time, but just do the sales survey at the time of the sale.
Okay.
That's that point.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Burgoyne. Okay. Anything further as it relates to the sale of the Monroe Street property? No? Okay, then we move on to our final discussion item, which is the Greenway Path proposal and the corresponding article from AnnArbor.com that Mr. Burgoyne distributed earlier this evening. Mr. Burgoyne.
Well, what's interesting to me about that is that there are 3 sources of funds for about $1 million, and it's a great project. They're doing great stuff in Pittsfield there. There's a Transportation Alternatives Program, and the other day the lady who was here from MDOT talked about that. There's the Natural Resources Trust Fund, and there's Connecting Community Washtenaw County. And they've got a project that's $1.8 million, and Pittsfield is able to put up about maybe 10% in getting all of this accomplished, and that's the great thing for their citizens. In Saline, I see where a combination of grant sources could be put to advantage to get a non-motorized path that would come to the downtown, especially in the area where we do have some funding ourselves, near the cemetery where the sidewalk is broken up, and, you know, channeling people into the downtown, which I think would be good for getting customers to the downtown, on the one hand. And on the other hand, if we could do a replacement, which we do have to do a replacement sidewalks at some point, but replace it in such a way it would be a non-motorized path access, that would be a benefit. And it is in our non-motorized plan to connect towards the west end. I know there's some impediments where the bridge is and so forth, but there's some areas on the other side where Mickey's Dairy Twist where it is feasible. And sometimes, as in Pittsfield and Ann Arbor, they don't do every path that's in their plan all the time. They do segments. Okay. So I just want to bring this up again to see, is there any way that staff can look at these things and maybe not do something as spectacularly great as Pittsfield did, but accomplish another link, you know, another piece?
We will, well, I appreciate the article, and I appreciate you bringing it up, and staff will definitely take a look at it and see if there's ways in which the city of Saline can qualify for some of these grant dollars. It goes without saying, I think everyone on the dais here would agree that one of our goals, our personal goals as council members, but also our goals, I would hope, as private citizens, is to increase and improve the connectivity and walkability of our community. So if we can achieve or leverage outside resources and dollars to help accomplish that goal, that would be terrific.
Which is good for our downtown, and also if you have somebody bicycling in as a family from the west end, then that's good for health. That's good for the businesses downtown. There's everybody wins. Reduces
traffic congestion. There's a whole host of benefits.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Burgoyne. Mr. Gearbaugh.
Just a couple of real quick things. Could we have an update from Mr. Campbell at next meeting about Monroe Street Properties, the old Universal Dye Plant?
Yep.
That sets.
Yep.
And then I just want to remind everyone that this weekend is the Saline Summerfest on Friday and Saturday. So Main Street's been working really hard on that. And then the other thing is the dedication of the new arch on Wednesday in the alley behind Brecken Grill and Mangiamo's. That'll happen at 6 p.m.
Yes.
It was installed today.
Yeah. So, real quick, I apologize that I failed to mention Summerfest. Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Summerfest is our signature summertime event in downtown Saline, so I hope to see all my colleagues there. Those of you in the audience and those of you who will be reading about this or listening at home, please come on down. I think the weather's supposed to be pretty mild, which will be nice, and there's a lot of activities, and it's a lot of fun. So I hope to see you on both Saturday evening and then all day and into the evening on Saturday as well. Mr. Burgoyne.
When do you think that we will get further information on changes in personal property tax or how that's moving?
You want to talk to me about that?
Well, as I think Mr. Smith at the last meeting talked about, I know at least what he communicated to me is that I believe the Lieutenant Governor is hoping to roll out potential legislation very soon, if not right after Labor Day. And I think I will certainly ask him to see if he has any future, or I'm sure any additional information since the last meeting, because he'll be here at the next meeting on the 19th.
Otherwise, it'll just be similar to what he described, but it's just moving.
Sure. Yep.
Okay.
That's what we'll see if we can see if we'll ask him for another update if there are any changes.
I would confirm that, Mr. Burgoyne. My understanding from being an employee of the state of Michigan and working in Lansing is that the rollout is expected sometime in September when the legislature returns. Okay. If there's nothing further, Mr. Rhodes.
Just wanted to acknowledge Interim Clerk Rutledge's attendance at our meetings lately and all of the good work that she's done in filling in for our former clerk, Ms. Hill. And you might also want to acknowledge our...
Yep, I'm actually just getting to that.
Okay.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely, we greatly appreciate everything that Ms. Rutledge does. She's an outstanding employee, and we're very lucky to have her. Okay? And I'll be getting to our city clerk in just a moment. But first, if there's nothing further under the discussion items portion of our agenda, we've come to public comments. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Okay, there are no public comments. Is there any other business to come before the City Council this evening? Just a reminder, we have a work meeting with the Special Projects Commission to discuss our strategy related to tax abatements on the 19th at 6:30 p.m. here at City Hall, with a regular council meeting following that at 7:30. We have tentative, but I do think it's going to happen, a joint meeting with the Saline Area School Board at 6:30 p.m. on the 22nd. That's when the ad hoc committee that was looking at the consolidation of Saline Parks and Rec and Community Ed will be reporting back. So please make an effort to attend that meeting. It's important, very important. And then finally, we have another regular council meeting on the 9th, beginning at 7:30, but beginning at 6:30, we're going to have a public open house and meet and greet with our new city clerk, Terry Royal, who's in the audience this evening. Terry, if you'd please stand or raise your hand. Very good. We're happy to have you here this evening, and we look forward to working with you. And of course, you are all encouraged to attend that meet and greet at 6:30 on the 9th. And we encourage your neighbors and your friends and other city residents to attend that function as well. It'll be a great opportunity to meet the city clerk, and we all know what sort of profound impact the city clerk has on municipal affairs. And we expect great things from Terry, and so we welcome you here this evening. Thank you. There are no absences this evening, so we will dispense with that. And now I'm going to need to entertain a motion to convene into closed session for the purpose of discussing strategy connected with negotiations of a collective bargaining agreement. The City Council will not reconvene into regular session at the conclusion of the closed session. Is there a motion to convene into closed session?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Gearbaugh. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Tahar. The clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Rhodes.
Yes.
Councilmember Terhar.
Yes.
Councilmember Gearbach.
Yes.
Councilmember Peters.
Yes.
Councilmember Roth.
Yes.
Councilmember Burgoyne.
Yes.
Mayor Marl.
Yes. We are now convening into closed session at 9:17 p.m.